Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or simply hoping to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psych Reg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Bernie Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about some of the changes coming with Facebook.
Recently announced.
Yeah. This was an article written in Psychology Today, and it's very recent. It was just from a couple of days ago, because again, it's covering some of the, or sort of proposing concerns about some of the changes that Facebook has coming up pretty soon.
As you know, because you constantly tease me about it, chide me, criticize me about it. I'm not much of a Facebook user.
That's true.
Never have been. I had no interest in there was no content on there that I was particularly interested in.
Now, MySpace, you were all over MySpace.
I don't even remember MySpace. I don't even know there was a MySpace. Okay, that's how far. No, I've heard people talk about it, but so I'm not aware of these changes. I mean, to me, if you don't know the medium, the changes. I said, well, I don't know what there was before. Right. But apparently, Facebook over time began including more stories.
Right.
Just began putting up
news
content. Right. Because there was a time, I read an article not long ago that said most people get their news from Facebook.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And so I don't.
Right.
Okay. I didn't know that, and I wasn't aware of the change.
Right.
Okay. Well, apparently, and I think it had something to do with the election.
Right.
That all this the business about false news.
Right.
So Mark Zuckerberg announced recently that they would have less of that content. Right. Which means more of what?
You will now get more updates. You will receive more updates on your wall of your friends, people that you're following.
Your wall?
Yeah.
See?
People that you're following, and I don't know. So you'll get their updates and their status updates and their
vacation pictures and party pictures and all the good things that are happening. So you're going to get, they're going to replace the news content.
So much news content
with social.
Right.
Would you call it social interaction content?
You can, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can refer to it as that.
So there's more stuff about birthdays and.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, it's shifting away, and I think you're right. I think part of that is because of the concerns and issues related to the election from last year, 2016.
2016.
But also, it has to do, I think, with some congressional hearings and stuff too, because I know that it was going to become a significant point of discussion that, as you were sort of saying, Facebook and some other forms of social media were starting to replace official news outlets as the primary source of
that's what I read.
Information.
You know, that more and more people, in fact, a majority of people, were getting their news from social media rather than news outlets. And the concern was it wasn't edited content. In other words, things would come into Facebook and simply get posted, whereas in a news story, you want to check your sources.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so some of it's my sort of gut impression that that part of this is also related to the fact that, Mark Zuckerberg and some of the other social media groups do not want to become news outlets.
Yeah, because that would be an obligation.
Right, and there's a different set of obligations and expectations that we put on them.
Yeah, and now with anybody can post anything. Right. And so I'm thinking that fake news and the Russian meddling, I think those are probably the issues that maybe led to this.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So we're going to get more interaction.
More stuff from our people that we're following and their friends and stuff like that. Okay. So, but this raises an interesting question that's proposed by Amy Morin, who writes for Psychology Today, and this is a column entitled "Facebook's Changes Could Be Bad for Your Mental Health."
Right.
And so the what she's proposing here, which I think is a really interesting thing to think about, is as we're getting rid of some of the news and we're going to start receiving more information from the people that we're following, we're going to now start experiencing some of those issues or increase our experiences with issues related to jealousy and related to, it looks like everybody is having so much fun.
Oh, sure.
That's the issue that with social media that we've talked about so many times. People put sort of the best version of themselves. There are those who do the opposite, actually. They put sort of, it's very grim and, sour and down. Some people, do some of those kinds of things. Yeah, looking for sympathy, looking for, attention, sort of because look how terrible things are. That's not the typical, but some people do that. Instead, what we get a lot of is this sort of painted over, look how wonderful things are. This was our, vacation. It could have been a vacation from 5 years ago, but they're posting pictures now, and it looks like they're still living this, very exciting, happy, engaging life. And so the concern is, of course, that we're going to start getting an increase in this experience of fear of missing out.
Well, clearly we have that problem with social media, is that you create, not only present, you create the best image of yourself. We have that capacity now.
Right.
You create the best self that you can, and that's what you post.
Right.
You take pictures of that, because now when you see people doing anything, it's always about the picture.
Right.
I was listening to some friend of mine the other night. So they were out for dinner, and one of the girls took 21 poses before she approved of the picture that would be on Facebook.
Yeah.
They kept posing and posing and posing to get it just right.
Right.
And I thought, wow, how sad. I mean, how interesting.
You almost said how sad.
I meant sad. I said interesting, but yes, I meant sad. That the object was to get the right picture to post rather than enjoy the experience.
And it's the right picture to post to make it look natural and impulsive and, just, hey, look.
Candid.
We're having
this in a moment.
Yeah.
Whereas it took several minutes, and she kept insisting on retaking it until she looked exactly the way she wanted.
Right.
Then she approved that picture. And I guess the rest were discarded or something.
Yeah.
And that's the one that got posted.
Yeah. So in this article, she makes a very interesting observation. And she says that, the author says that in her therapy office, no one has ever come in and said, I was looking on Facebook and this ad came up and or this news article came up or anything, and it made me very depressed. She says nobody ever has come in to say that.
Oh, that a news article or an ad bothered me. Mm-hmm.
But she has had people come in and say, all of my friends seem so much happier than I do.
Well, it makes me think of that very tragic story from the University of Pennsylvania a couple of years ago, where the young freshman did take her own life. And in the note that she left, said, it just seems that everybody's happier than I am. When I go on Facebook or whatever she was using, she said, it seems like everybody's much happier than I am. And she ended up committing suicide.
Right. So again, this is the concern that the author is proposing, is that, when we have this increase in posts, in content from our friends, that is going to increase our feelings of unhappiness or our feelings of insecurity, or that we're missing out, we're not living the life that all these other people are living, because they look like they're so engaged and having so much fun, and here we are at work.
Yeah, why is everybody so much happier? Why are they doing so many interesting things when my life is so boring? But I guess it would look like that because you're not only seeing one person having fun, you're seeing multiples. Everybody who you're friends with, and you could be talking about hundreds of people.
Right.
So you're looking at hundreds of images of other people having fun.
Right.
And as you say, you're going to work every day and cleaning the house and mowing the lawn.
Right.
And everybody else is in Paris and Montreal and the Grand Canyon. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, in addition to viewing more content that makes you feel worse, she says that we're also going to get less content of things that could make us feel better.
Okay, so it's a two-edged sword.
Right.
You're gonna get more of that. Look how happy we are. It makes me think of a thing the other day that somebody posted something, and they were in Europe for lunch, they'd gone to New York for lunch. Yeah. They had flown to New York to have lunch.
Who do you follow on Facebook?
Not me.
Oh,
I didn't follow it. It was sent to me by somebody else.
I was about to say.
And they said, yes, they flew to New York for lunch and then flew back.
That'd be a little bit longer of an hour lunch. We couldn't fit that in between patients.
No, I don't think that wouldn't be a takeout.
No.
That'd be a delivery of people. No, and they did. They had a plane and they flew to New York and had lunch at some place and they flew back. That was their day.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so you see all that and you see the happiness, you see all the smiles which are posed. I'm sorry.
Right.
We have learned, I said that on a podcast about a year ago, that we now know how to pose for Facebook, for pictures.
Yeah.
But you also have the other one that you don't have as much content that makes you happy.
Right.
And they mentioned here about the cats.
Yeah, there's silly cat videos and there's different memes and things like that. Those are going to be some of the ones that we view less because they're not going to, they're not going to be those. I guess they're part of those sets of videos and posts that are going to be sort of weeded by the new algorithms in Facebook. So we're not going to see those as often, and
that's true because all this is based on algorithms,
right? Yeah,
and they can't. That's right. They don't have an algorithm that filters out fake news. They probably don't have any way of doing that.
Right. Yeah.
That's right, because all this is algorithm based.
Yeah. So we're going to get less of those, which is unfortunate because those are...
So you have less of the stuff that makes you happy, more of the stuff that makes you unhappy. And apparently there's been quite a bit of research done. It's been reported now in the professional journals that social media increases social comparisons.
Right.
That's the connection.
Yeah.
That social media increases social comparisons, and if you feel that you're not measuring up, so the social comparisons cause a change in your mood.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the in this article, she goes on to talk about the fact that most people aren't very social on social media. That we post things, but we're not social from the perspective of interacting.
We're not interacting
with
each other.
Right.
Okay.
And so, she sort of quotes Mark Zuckerberg in saying that he wants people to make more connections and those kinds of things. But as we will talk about in another podcast this week, the concern is that since we're not very social on social media, it really does fall on our shoulders the need to be more interactive in real life.
So we're not using that. Zuckerberg's goal was to make people more interactive, increase the interaction between individuals.
Right.
That's not what people are using this for. They're using it to post their stuff, okay? And we read that stuff and get depressed. Okay?
Right. They're using it, and I think that the new vocabulary is extremely interesting. And I think this new vocabulary started with Snapchat because people want to tell their story. It's now stories that we get instead of posts. And I guess they still call them status updates and things like that, but they're oftentimes now referred to as stories. And so people want to tell their stories. They don't want to necessarily interact with someone. They want to tell their stories.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's what people do in real life. We want to talk, not listen.
Right.
Okay. Most of us talk 80% of the time and listen 20% of the time. And that's essentially how we use social media.
Right.
We want to talk about our story,
right,
not listen to others. We'll watch others, but mainly we want to tell ours.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
So now we're going to talk about that. We're if you looked at the schedule for this week in post, we're going to kind of shift it around a little bit because the way in which we kind of decided that we were going to talk about this one kind of necessitates an adjustment in the schedule. So we're going to talk tomorrow more about being social without social media.
Right.
This idea of
When did we stop talking to each other?
Yeah. The fact that fact that we stopped talking to each other when social media became such a big thing, we stopped talking to each other.
Now, when you say social media, we're talking about various types of social media. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, anything you use that way. Okay. But essentially, we're telling our story.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're presenting our best selves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that leads to social comparisons.
Right.
We're always comparing ourselves to others.
Right.
We're presenting our best selves, but other people are presenting their selves that seem better than ours.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it becomes and this is the case in so many situations where, okay, so you raised the bar to here, so now I got to go here to make my story more interesting.
Right.
And then, you went to this.
You went to New York for lunch.
Yeah, so we went to Paris for lunch.
That's
that type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the cure? So now what?
Well, again, the cure is, or the idea is, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, the idea is we need to find a way and sort of engineer more face-to-face, direct interactions with people in real life.
When I read this, I got to the end, because the end of the article, they talk about that.
Right.
That what you have to do is you have to increase, you have to have more face-to-face interactions.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
You need more interaction, but this medium, the social media, doesn't really provide that.
Right.
So you have to create more face-to-face, person-to-person. And we're doing less of that.
Right.
Okay. And if you're and what it made me think of is parents when they come in and they say, my daughter or my son addicted to their phones. They're always in their phone. They're always in their phone. They're always in their phone. That's true. They are, especially after children born after 1995 who have known nothing but smartphones and social media. But I also think about, and we wonder about the effects on children. But I also worry about the effects that it has on adults, on partners, because for those of us who don't use social media very much, and that would be the baby boom generation, it does rankle us that people are on their phones when they're with us. I've heard many, even the end of the baby boom generation, people in their late 40s and early 50s, also complain about, well, she's always on her phone. And it's not just old people, unless 50 is old. 50 is not old, is it? 50 is the new 30. How would you know? How would you know, right? since you're 22. No, people are complaining about that.
Right.
That not only is it bad for you, and we see it in restaurants. You know, that I think one article I read that 90% of people were on their not talking to each other in a restaurant. Okay, and so it does rankle us that you're on your phone rather than talking to me.
Right.
When I see somebody on his phone, I look at that as they're talking to somebody else and I can't interrupt. So I have to wait until they're off their phone. And people say, no, you don't need to wait. I said, no, I need to wait.
Right.
Because you're off. And I'm not angry about it. It's just, it's impolite for me to interrupt whatever you're doing.
Right.
You're talking to somebody else. You don't believe that. We'll talk about that. We'll argue about this a little more tomorrow. It's tomorrow's article that has that 90% number in it.
I'm not going to argue.
Yeah, I can tell that argue look. You have that argue face.
That argue face?
Morning. It's Monday.
Well.
No, it's an interesting. So it is worse for your mood.
Yeah.
This may not be good for your mood because the social comparison leads to depressed mood, and people are getting depressed about this.
Yeah.
What worries me is anybody who is prone to depression. In comparing to, I don't care.
Right.
Okay, but some people do care what others are doing.
Right.
And if you're prone to depression anyway, making these social comparisons could trigger those depressive feelings, as it did in this girl from the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
You know, she may have been prone to depression,
right,
but this triggered it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, but like, as you said, we'll talk more about this, more about that tomorrow.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just something to think about as Facebook's making some of these changes.
Be careful with these things, right? I mean, be careful with how you deal with this, and please do more face-to-face, more person-to-person. Put your phone down, talk to people.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid. Thanks for sharing this episode of the Mental Breakdown and Psych Reg podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will find all of our previous podcasts and much more. We would be honored if you would become a patron through patreon.com, where any donation you can manage will go to the development and creation of more content. Just visit patreon.com/thementalbreakdown for more information. Thanks again for listening. Have an awesome day, and we look forward to being back in your feed tomorrow morning.